Okay, so we're going to continue looking at the chemical industry today. This shouldn't be as long as yesterday's lesson because there's not as much in it, but we'll get started. So today we're going to start by looking at the environmental considerations that you might have to look at when you are doing a chemical plant, okay? And actually in the UK there's a large number of regulations from the health and safety that applies to people at their work, okay? So it's not just chemical industry, but because the chemical industry could be particularly hazardous, then these are always more important because you'll be working with chemicals, and I suppose there's always the opportunity for something bad to happen, and there has been disasters in the chemical industry in the past. If you want, you could go and have a look at something called, I'll write it here, it's the Bhopal disaster. And it's about a disaster in a chemical plant where the chemical reaction kind of ran away from itself and it caused the plant to explode. So if you want to have a look at seeing how dangerous they can be, then that is something you could go away and look at in your own time. Essentially, what we need to consider when we're looking at the chemical industry is we need to think about the safety of the chemicals being used. Are the people who are working with those chemicals directly going to get injured by them? Is there a high risk of that? Is there a high risk of the people who are involved in the transport of it, or any products you make as well? Are they going to be dangerous? So you've got to think about that. You obviously want to minimise your waste products. You do not want what used to happen back in the olden days is people just used to dump the waste products into the rivers, and what that caused is that caused pollution of the rivers. If you had toxic waste kind of going from your chemical plant, then that could poison the wildlife around the river. It's not nice. So you need to obviously think about safely and following the procedures to properly get rid of any industrial waste from your chemical plant. Are there any hazardous products being made? We've kind of covered that. Is there any kind of safety warnings that might be part of your product in terms of storage, or the people using it at the end? And also disposable of any byproducts. So yeah, we've already talked about marketability. Can we actually sell them? If you can sell them as a product, then great, because it means you don't actually have to get rid of it, and it's actually going to good use. So you might be able to sell off your waste product as actually a product for something else. I was trying to think of another one there, but I can't think of one off the top of my head, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Also, you need to think about the neighbours. If you'd done the worksheet that you had a looked at yesterday, and it talked about Mossmoran, actually Mossmoran has a big flare out the top of the plant where they're burning off excess gas. And I've heard from some of the residents that live around it, because I've got some family in Fife, that they particularly don't like that. Sometimes there's a smell, so you've obviously got to be considerate of your neighbours, the people who are living about your plant. They might have bought a house there before the plant was made, so they wouldn't be very happy if just, a chemical plant just turned up and kind of caused environmental problems for them. Also, your safety of the employees. Are they trained? Is there any chance for them to get hurt at work? You've got to consider these things as well. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, and you've got a good idea of what we're considering in terms of if we were building a chemical plant. So we're going to have a look at two different types of processes. These you do need to know. I'll put that all up there for you so you can see. Basically, we need to know about these two that are called batch and continuous. Now, what a batch process is it's a process that we can use to make small amount of products. You might want to use it to make pharmaceuticals, so any medicines or kind of things like that. If you're thinking the coronavirus vaccine, it probably, because it's dead specialised, it's probably actually made on a batch process as well. You've got the storage of it. In particular, one of them needs to be stored at -60 or -70 degrees Celsius. That's probably going to be done in a batch process so that they're not just churning out all this vaccine and then they don't have time to actually freeze it and put it into safe storage. So that's probably done in a batch process so that they can actually control that a lot more. Cosmetics as well, things like makeup and maybe like kind of cosmetic treatments. they're all done in a batch process as well. And actually, if you look on the side of stuff, you'll actually be able to see a batch number, and that shows you that it's been done in batches. If there was an issue with any of the batches, then you can look at the batch number and maybe recall all those products as well. So that happens from time to time. What actually happens when you do this is you'll have a reactant, you'll do the reaction, and then you'll maybe get like a mixture of products, and then you need to separate them and then package up your actual product you want. That could be quite labour intensive because there's a lot of steps in there, and then what they maybe do is they maybe clean the stuff in between uses. Sometimes you can use the same apparatus, your same kind of machinery, but for different medicines. So one factory might make paracetamol and ibuprofen different times from each other. Maybe one day they make paracetamol and the next day it's all cleaned out, and then the next day they make ibuprofen, and they maybe do it in batches like that because it's maybe quite a similar process, just maybe the chemicals you're using are slightly different. So that can be quite good, and that's good if you maybe don't want to make lots of something, and also you can make several different types of similar chemicals. Whereas a continuous process is used to make bulk chemicals. So for example, ammonia is made by the Haber process, sulfuric acid is made by the contact process, and we can also make salt through a continuous process. It's continual, there's less labour intensive. The plant is doing most of the work for them. It will have been set up so that it's just you put the chemicals in or they're pumped in or whatever, and then the machinery would do the manual labour kind of thing. That's always running 24/7, and you're only going to ever make one product. That's why you can do that. So for batch, we maybe had to make different products, but this can only make one product at a time. The only thing is, for a disadvantage of this, is that if the machinery breaks down, or if maybe one part of the machinery breaks down, then the whole plant has to shut down in order to repair. And obviously, to stop that happening, and maybe like any delays because they can't get any parts or something like that, then you maybe want to have routine maintenance as well. So there might be times when the plant has to shut down. Now this is not good because it also means that you end up having to lose maybe like a day's work. You might have chemicals being pumped in that you're not getting to use, so there might be quite a lot of wastage with that as well. So any downtime for the plant is lost money at the end of the day, so they really don't like that. So there'll be some sort of balance between maintenance and like downtime. So there's actually three main costs involved in the chemical industry, and we can categorise these under three headings. One of these is capital costs. These are like costs that you have to put out when you start something. So the initial expenses, you might have your land, you might have your buildings, your plant and your machinery, then you'll all have to pay for up front, and just to get everything kind of set up. Then you have fixed costs. These are constant and they don't change with the level of production. So you might have a small plant or a large plant, you would still have these costs going on, no matter how efficient you are. Your plant would depreciate, which means it loses money in terms of what the actual plant itself is worth. So just like a house, the house prices might go down, and that's just one of the parts of home ownership that you get. Same just with the buildings that are involved in industry. Wages, you always have to pay your workers, so there'll be a cost there for the people's wages, and obviously for maintenance as well. You'll need to pay for the plant to get fixed and any repairs that might come up. Okay, so they're fixed costs. Then we've got these variable costs, which could increase as production increases, but also they can fluctuate from time to time. So your raw materials, if you use more material, then you're obviously going to be paying more, though you might get more back in profit at the end. And obviously they can fluctuate up and down. The price of oil, maybe you might use oil as a feedstock. The price of oil has been known to fluctuate quite often. Sometimes it's even the negative. They pay you for taking barrels off them. That's very rare though. Distribution, so actually getting your product out there, it depends where you want to take it. Obviously if you're putting more product out, then you're going to have to do more distribution, so that's going to cost more as well. And energy, and we're going to quickly talk about energy just now. These can be high, therefore we need to be careful about the amount of energy we use in order to get as much profit and make sure our business is successful. So in terms of saving energy, We could use heat from exothermic reactions elsewhere in the plant to maybe give energy required to get things started. We could use waste heat to generate electricity, maybe for the plant, or maybe you could power some of the houses around where the plant is. That might actually look quite good for the plant as well in terms of, you know, relationships with their neighbours, and maybe it would keep them happy and they wouldn't feel so bad about a big flare, for example, coming out the top of the plant at night, lighting up the whole sky. And also there'd be pollution. Low energy wastage is always desirable. You don't want to be getting rid of lots of waste products. If you can sell them on as byproducts that people would actually want, then that's going to not be a waste of energy kind of thing, and you're not going to have to waste time and energy getting rid of it when people would actually buy it when you're selling it. Now we're going to have a quick look at some past paper questions, and we're going to see what these answers would be. So which of these is a raw material in the chemical industry? Well, that answer would be calcium carbonate, because that's another name for chalk or limestone, and you can get that quite easily just in the Earth's surface. You don't have to do any processing to it, it's there. So that would be a raw material. Remember we said a raw material was one where you did not have to process it in any way. So that answer would be B. Which of the following is a best description of a feedstock? Well, we know that a feedstock is a chemical from which other chemicals can be extracted or synthesized. Okay, so that answer would be D. Next one, so this is just a past paper question. It's obviously asking about an alcohols and glycerol and fats and oils, and it's telling you that glycerol, obviously there's a connection there with propene being used to make glycerol. It says that propene can be used as a feedstock in an alternative process as shown. Well, we know what a feedstock is. We know that a feedstock is this answer here, a chemical from which other chemicals can be extracted or synthesized. So I'll write that in here so you've got the definition. So a feedstock is a chemical from which other chemicals can be extracted or synthesized. And that is us for chemical industry. Oh, we've got one more. It says, what is meant by a batch process? Well, a batch process would be smaller scale production, done in batches. Used for cosmetics or pharmaceuticals. And that should be you. Okay? If you've got any questions, you can let your teacher know.